And look at those two pictures. It's just so interesting. Look at those two contrasting pictures. These pictures were taken just weeks apart. Queen Elizabeth II, just days before her demise, anointing Liz Truss as the Prime Minister of UK. Liz Truss ended up as the shortest serving Prime Minister in British history. Now you have King Charles III, who's also relatively new in office, anointing Rishi Sunak. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Rishi Sunak is about to deliver his first address to the people of United Kingdom as their Prime Minister. Let's listen in.
I've just been to Buckingham Palace and accepted His Majesty the King's invitation to form a government in his name. It is only right to explain why I'm standing here as your new Prime Minister. Right now, our country is facing a profound economic crisis. The aftermath of COVID still lingers. Putin's war in Ukraine has destabilized energy markets and supply chains the world over. I want to pay tribute to my predecessor, Liz Truss. She was not wrong to want to improve growth in this country. It is a noble aim. And I admired her restlessness to create change. But some mistakes were made. Not born of ill will or bad intentions. Quite the opposite, in fact. But mistakes nonetheless. And I have been elected as leader of my party and your Prime Minister, in part, to fix them. And that work begins immediately. I will place economic stability and confidence at the heart of this government's agenda. This will mean difficult decisions to come. But you saw me during COVID doing everything I could to protect people and businesses with schemes like furlough. There are always limits, more so now than ever. But I promise you this, I will bring that same compassion to the challenges we face today. The government I lead will not leave the next generation, your children and grandchildren, with a debt to settle that we were too weak to pay ourselves. I will unite our country, not with words, but with action. I will work day in and day out to deliver for you. This government will have integrity, professionalism, and accountability at every level. Trust is earned, and I will earn yours. I will always be grateful to Boris Johnson for his incredible achievements as Prime Minister, and I treasure his warmth and generosity of spirit. And I know he would agree that the mandate my party earned in 2019 is not the sole property of any one individual. It is a mandate that belongs to and unites all of us. And the heart of that mandate is our manifesto. I will deliver on its promise. A stronger NHS, better schools, safer streets, control of our borders, protecting our environment, supporting our armed forces, levelling up and building an economy that embraces the opportunities of Brexit, where businesses invest, innovate and create jobs. I understand how difficult this moment is. After the billions of pounds it cost us to combat COVID, after all the dislocation that caused, in the midst of a terrible war that must be seen successfully to its conclusions, I fully appreciate how hard things are. And I understand too that I have work to do to restore trust after all that has happened. All I can say is that I am not daunted. I know the high office I have accepted, and I hope to live up to its demands. But when the opportunity to serve comes along, you cannot question the moment, only your willingness. So I stand here before you, ready to lead our country into the future, to put your needs above politics, to reach out and build a government that represents the very best traditions of my party. Together, we can achieve incredible things. We will create a future worthy of the sacrifices so many have made, and fill tomorrow and every day thereafter with hope. Thank you.
All right, that was a brief address by Britain's new Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. Let's take you through the details of what he's just said. A short but a powerful speech where, apart from paying tributes to his predecessors, Boris Johnson and Liz Truss, essentially Rishi Sunak says that I am going to work towards earning the trust of the people of the United Kingdom. He says, I am going to, in fact, place economic stability at the heart of the Conservative Party's agenda. I have been elected to fix the problems that this country faces, and that work begins now. He says this government will have integrity, professionalism and accountability at every level. Let me go back to my colleague Alex, who's closely tracking all these developments for us in London. Alex, a very brief speech there by Rishi Sunak, his first address to the nation as the country's premier. We know he takes over at a very difficult time, therefore not surprising that he is focusing so much on trust, because he does realize that there is a massive trust deficit that exists in that country right now between the people of the United Kingdom and the political class, especially the Conservative Party right now. Therefore, he is talking repeatedly about earning the trust of the people.
Absolutely. He mentioned trust a number of times in that speech. I didn't quite count them, but there was definitely at least half a dozen in there. You're right, it was a very powerful speech, and it does go to show that he's trying to put the country first. He mentioned they were better together. He mentioned that long-term future plans, all of those words and phrases that he was using was trying to allow people to hear his true self, what he wants. He said that he wants to put the country first, and it's about time, because we've heard so much of this backstabbing and infighting, that someone saying, you know what, you're first, UK, this is what we actually needed to hear. Now, when he did say, he talks about difficult decisions right at the beginning there, we did hear that already from Chancellor Jeremy Hunt. He's potentially going to continue being the Chancellor. So he said in his statement only a mere couple of weeks ago that there will be difficult decisions being taken, and that is to talk with regards to what we're going to do with this economic recovery that we need to figure out, the deficit that we're in. But generally, I think he did obviously right at the beginning also take a slight dig at the past government. He talked about Liz Truss. He said that she was enthusiastic to create change, but that some mistakes were made. And it wasn't due to a result of bad intentions, but mistakes were made nevertheless. And therefore, he's referring to the market. The market spooked straight when Liz Truss was involved as Prime Minister, when she got Kwasi Kwarteng, her Chancellor then. to give out the mini statement. But also one interesting fact, I think, with regards to the statement that he just gave, he came across as much more natural than he did yesterday. None of this robotic voice. I think he comes across as a really kind, empathetic person. And it's clear that he is going to be putting forward that 2019 manifesto that he was part of when Boris Johnson was Prime Minister, which is going to be building the economy, but in a slow, steady way where we've got a long-term future. Now, that is quite interesting because obviously the opposition have been saying that he has no manifesto, that he's just been last minute and therefore we should have a general election because what does Rishi Sunak stand for? Well, he's just said it there. He stands for the same things that everyone was voting for the Conservative Party as a whole back when the manifesto was put in place. So he's come back a little bit there at the opposition to say, this is what I stand for, this is what I've always stood for, and this is what we're going to be doing going forward because it's about the country now. It's not about individuals. It's going to be about trust and moving forward. Very powerful speech from our Prime Minister there.
Absolutely. A short but powerful speech from the new British Prime Minister. Let me go back to Kadira Petiagoda at this point. Alex, stay on with us. Kadira, of course, you know, Alex making the point there that Rishi Sunak repeatedly talked about trust. He knows that he takes over as the British Prime Minister at a time when the Conservative Party is perhaps facing its biggest credibility crisis ever. We know that in poll after poll, the Labour Party has got its highest numbers in decades. It's not without reason that the Labour Party and the Scottish National Party and others are actually demanding a fresh election, saying nobody voted for Rishi Sunak. So even as he tries to fix the economy, bring it back on the rails, is that likely to be his biggest challenge, to convince the British people and indeed his own party men and women that he is the right man for the job, despite the fact that he takes over under these unusual circumstances where he's constantly being accused of being an unelected leader?
Yes, I think that'll be a core challenge for him. That's something that the opposition will likely use against him, given that, you know, we've had this circus of revolving prime ministers since Boris Johnson. And also, you know, the fact that there's these deep divisions within the Conservative Party membership, most of whom support Boris, most of whom are hardcore Brexit supporters, and they'd be feeling disillusioned as well. So it's going to be a big challenge for him. But I think that, you know, it's going to be exceptionally difficult because the core structural issues that are creating the divisions in the country, that are creating the hardships, are, you know, 12 years of economic policy, most of which was austerity. You know, you've got this huge divide between the poor and the rich. And these are structural issues, and they're connected to international policy as well. And I don't know if it's you know, possible for any one, you know, prime minister to have that much of an impact where he can actually resolve those divisions to the degree that they can actually win an election, because I think it's really come to a boiling point where the public are really, you know, hankering for change. And I think that the same factors have been there for a few years, but last time Boris was able to capitalize on the Brexit issue to sort of, you know, distract voters from these core economic problems. But I think now it's going to be even more difficult. So the challenge is really cut out for him.
Okay, he definitely has his task cut out for him. Kadira, we'll come back to you in just a moment. Please stay on with us. Let me go back to my colleague Alex, who's closely tracking all these big developments in London. Alex, let me come back to you. Now, even as Rishi Sunak tries to fix the economic troubles that the United Kingdom is facing, perhaps for the very first time in its history, the runaway inflation, soaring energy crisis, the cost of living, which seems to be almost unprecedented, surging borrowing costs. It is a very, very difficult time for the British people. You know, Kadira talked about how there is a deep political divide that stems from the deep economic divide that currently exists in that country. Not only have Rishi Sunak's critics repeatedly accused him of being an unelected leader, many have also pointed out how he comes from one of the wealthiest families in the United Kingdom and that he is richer than the king himself, and therefore is he really in a position to understand the problems of the ordinary people of Britain? And while that criticism may or may not be legitimate, but at the end of the day, we know that perception matters in politics.
Oh, absolutely. And one of when he turned up and one of the digs not too long ago, he was wearing Prada shoes, and obviously we've seen him make a few faffs when he's gone to Wagamama and he didn't know how to use a credit card, and he tried to use a club card. So all these things do show that maybe he is a little bit out of touch with regards to how much money he has, but he has been the Chancellor previously and he was working with the budget, so he is in a good position to understand exactly what deficit we're in and where the money could be coming from, because he's been in that position for so long. Of course, looking at his personal circumstances, it's something that we shouldn't be taking as looking for any MPs, because obviously Boris Johnson himself, and a lot of them are from Eton with a very exclusive education, but it's about what they can do for the country. Rishi Sunak did help out so much during COVID with the furlough scheme, and he was pushing for the energy price cap and to make sure that people of lower incomes can get the money that they need. So I think that generally overall that he is really in the best position because he's come from being the Chancellor and he does understand exactly what's the situation now, and hopefully he can understand how we're going to get through it and what exactly we need. He did say when he was in the hustings that he was talking about the best economical stability and how we should be slow and steady. There are a few things from that hustings that maybe would be contentious for the fact that he wanted to pay back some of the COVID debt straight away. And Liz Truss said it's not right to be paying debt when we are trying to fix our economy. So there may be some changes that we're going to be seeing in the fiscal statement that's going to come out. But ultimately, he can't help the fact that he is from a very wealthy family and his wife is extremely rich. It's about what he does now and how he takes us forward. We've already seen some really positive action from him when he was Chancellor. So let's hope that continues.
All right, he does come from a very privileged background. There's no doubt about that, Alex. Remember, this is somebody who studied at one of the best known schools in the United Kingdom. He studied at Oxford University. He's been a Fulbright scholar. He studied at Stanford University. That's where he met his wife, who you just referred to as being the daughter of a billionaire Indian businessman. And of course, Rishi Sunak also comes from a very affluent family, and therefore it is almost being used as a weapon by his critics to attack him, to say that he is worth more than 700 million pounds. He is richer than King Charles, and therefore can he really understand working class problems? Alex, we'll come back to you in just a moment. But before that, let's bring our viewers up to speed on some of the biggest challenges that Rishi Sunak faces as he takes over as the British Prime Minister. He delivered that short and powerful speech a short while ago. We'll try and play that out for you in just a moment, where he talked about the economic challenges the country faces, where he talked about uniting the Conservative Party and the country. So, what are some of the biggest challenges that Rishi Sunak faces? Remember, he has served as the Chancellor of the Exchequer under Boris Johnson. He now has to brace himself for what is clearly a rocky road ahead of him. He inherits an economy which is possibly headed for a massive recession. The outgoing Prime Minister, Liz Truss, resigned after her budget or mini budget of tax cuts was funded by debt sent shockwaves through the markets, bringing the pound to a record low. It even necessitated the intervention of the Bank of England. It triggered yields on government bonds to soar. The UK government had to make a U-turn on most of its budget provisions, including scaling back a cap on soaring energy bills that have contributed heavily to a cost of living crisis for tens of millions of Britons. Now, Rishi Sunak, remember, had been warning against Liz Truss's tax cuts. In the earlier battle that he fought for the Tory leadership, he had warned that her economic policies would prove to be disastrous, and his words definitely proved to be prophetic, because that mini budget, the now infamous mini budget, sent the pound crashing close to parity with the dollar. The former finance minister had promised to scrap VAT on household fuel bills for a year to tackle the rising cost of living. The Tory leader, who prioritized controlling inflation in his economic policies, now is getting a mixed response from the British citizens.
Someone who's been educated in Harvard knows exactly what he's doing. You know, it's the absolutely only choice. Instead of just going for, like a lot of the politicians in the road, just want to be a politician in their own interest. I think he has a genuine interest in the welfare of this country.
He's a low-tax, trickle-down economist. Won't work. He's got to go. Got to move aside.
We go back to Alex at this point. Alex, it's not just a divided country right now. It's also a deeply divided Conservative Party. While there are those who have enthusiastically endorsed Rishi Sunak as the right man for the right job, there are those who continue to question his credentials. They say he's an unelected leader. Nobody voted for him. Some seem to be unhappy just by virtue of the fact that he is a man of color. You know, that sort of inherent racism, unfortunately, has also come to the fore. It's been, in fact, displayed by many in that country in the last few days. And then there are those who say he's much too affluent to understand the challenges of the working class, of the average Briton. Therefore, the question really is, can he hope to win over the British people? Can he really hope to earn their trust? Because that's what he says he is looking to do. Let's be very clear. There is going to be no honeymoon period for Rishi Sunak. Isn't that correct, Alex?
You're absolutely right there. There isn't. He's got to get in there. He's got to make some changes. He's got to unify that party straight away. Yes, you are right. You know, there are going to be people that are going to oppose what he stands for and what he believes in. And I think that they were going to do that no matter what. Don't forget, when Liz Truss was anointed, they picked on her for having a poor background, and the fact that she got her earrings from Claire's Accessories, which turned out not to be true. So there's always going to be those people who want to backstab and belittle. Of course, Rishi Sunak also has those backbenchers who do believe that he's the reason that Boris Johnson was outed, despite the fact that they have a short-term memory on the fact of Partygate and the fact that that inquiry is still continuing to go on. And sadly, you are right, there is an inherent racism, especially around not just Rishi Sunak, but some of the other members of Parliament, despite the fact that he is very well educated and he has been in the position for long enough to know exactly what the government is doing and how they can evolve. I think that it's going to be a hard slog to get through past all of this absolute chaos that we've been seeing over and over again. But I don't believe that the party is ungovernable. I do think that he has the words, he has the background, he has the experience, and it's time for people to start listening and hope for what is the alternative. You know, that's a good question that doesn't keep getting put out there. What is the alternative? The opposition says they want a general election because the people didn't vote, but then how long will the general public have to wait until that general election has come about? They'll have to vote again. In the meantime, months could go by, and we've already suffered under this whole hustings from Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak previously, and now again. I don't think that the population really wants to see that happen, and to take so long to get to the point where economic stability is what is really needed. I think ultimately, whoever comes in power is always going to have all of this opposition and always going to have people picking apart their background. Despite the fact that he is extremely wealthy, he still has a job to do and he's still going to be held accountable. It's time to move forward. It's time to move on from all of this past history that we've experienced so quickly. And we're hopeful that the polls will show that positive. When the trustings were coming out, many of the polls that came out said that Rishi Sunak was actually more favourable to the UK than Liz Truss was, but the members voted her in. So hopefully we'll see that positivity again from the UK public, and really do need the Conservative Party to not think about themselves, to think about the country. And Rishi Sunak says he's going to be thinking about the country. He wants to talk about those long-term economical benefits. So It's time to put all of our pettiness behind and, as I keep saying, let's move forward.
Absolutely. It's interesting, Alex, you talk about positivity. I can tell you that Rishi Sunak's anointment as your country's Prime Minister has generated a lot of positivity and excitement here in India for obvious reasons. And for his sake, and perhaps for the sake of the British people, we do hope that we will see that in Britain as well. But there is no doubt that even as Rishi Sunak makes history becoming the first man of colour to become the British Prime Minister, he's also wearing a crown of thorns. Thanks very much, Alex, for getting us all those details.